Thank you all for joining us. The Columbian Editorial Board is pleased to welcome Secretary of State Steve Hobbs, who was appointed to the position last year and now is seeking election to the post. I'm Greg Jane, the editorial page editor at the Columbian, and I'll let the other board members introduce themselves. Colleen.
Hi, I'm Colleen Keller, assistant news editor at the Columbian and member of the editorial board.
And Craig.
I'm Craig Brown. I'm the editor of the Columbian and a member of the editorial board.
Yes, and days long past, we used to do these in person, but I'm glad we're able to meet this way. We also have a reporter sitting in here. She won't be asking questions in this forum, but may want to speak with you later and might be writing a story about this interview. And as mentioned previously, we are recording this and we will post it unedited on our website and our YouTube channel. And I should mention we will hold a separate interview with challenger Julie Anderson, which we also will post for the benefit of our readers. And with that, welcome to Mr. Hobbs. And why don't you take 1 to 2 minutes, introduce yourself briefly, explain why you are running, and then we will get on to some specific policy questions.
Sure.
So thank you.
I guess I'll give you my 2-minute standard elevator speech that I give that I timed. So how about that? So
sounds good.
Sure. Well, thank you. I've dedicated my life to public service, starting from enlisting in the Army at the age 17 to my current position in the Army National Guard as a lieutenant colonel. During these 33 years in uniform, I'm uniquely suited to defend our elections from cyber threats and misinformation because of my time in the NSA, graduate of Command and General Staff College, where we study strategic level threats, and my recent graduation from the Department of Defense Information School, and my current assignment as a public affairs officer in the National Guard. Along with that, I've served 15 years in the state Senate, moving our state forward with bipartisan solutions. And I'm your current Secretary of State, and it's an honor serving you. Just so you know, we've already done 2 special elections and a statewide primary, which ran very smoothly. During this year, we had to face 3 misinformation campaigns and a cyber threat. I think one of them I had discussed with you all, or 2 of them I had discussed with you all when I visited Vancouver a couple of months ago. These have been featured both in NPR's All Things Considered and NBC National News. Another January 6th is what we are trying to avoid in my office, and my office is prepared to turn misconceptions of our elections around and fight back on the big lie. I've dedicated myself to working across the aisle to get things done with a proven track record. This history of bipartisanship has earned my many endorsements from current Democratic and Republican legislators on both sides of the aisle, as well as organizations such as the Association of Washington Business and the Washington State Labor Council. In fact, my history of bipartisanship has me working with all different organizations, and many of you know what the work I did in the transportation realm when I was chair of the transportation package. And as a son of an Asian immigrant and the first person of color in this race and in this office, I'm dedicated to removing the barriers to the ballot box, to the underserved communities. And as father of a child with special needs, I want to make sure their voices are heard as well. And guess what? With only 34 days, 4 hours, 26 minutes, and 44 seconds, I am working hard to the very bitter end to earn your vote.
But who's counting?
Who's counting?
Great. Well, thank you. And you touched upon, obviously, one of the primary issues is election security. Why should voters in Washington believe that our elections are safe and secure and fair?
Well, yeah, because, the great thing about this state is we have vote by mail. You get your ballots 18 days before the election. And what we need to do in my office is tell that story, Greg, about why your ballots are secure. A lot of people don't know that we check all the signatures. A lot of people don't know that we do this at the county level. And in fact, if you want to witness what's going on behind the scenes, all you got to do is go to your county auditor, and they'll show you the ballots coming in, the ballots being counted, votes being processed. A lot of people don't know that the tabulation machines are not connected to the internet. So there's a lot of factors here and information that goes into elections that we have taken for granted. And my office is doing everything it can, working with the 39 counties, to let people know how how your elections are processed, not just reminding you to vote, because we're pretty good at reminding you to vote, and we do a good job about that, but we haven't done a good job of telling what's going on with the vote. And that's why we've launched, as of yesterday, Vote with Confidence campaign, which is going to go on all the social media platforms and broadcasts about how, what happens to your vote.
Now, and you, as you mentioned, that is up to the individual counties. What role does your office play other than public information?
Right. Well, again, we did the big public information or education, public service announcement that we're doing. We also give assistance to the 39 counties. So, for example, if there's a cyber concern or a misinformation campaign that the counties can't handle, your county is pretty good because it has the staff, but some counties cannot handle it. For example, I think I mentioned to you all when I visited Vancouver about the incident with the Albert sensors, in which there was a misinformation campaign directed at the Albert sensors, tying the Albert sensors. And by the way, just for the people watching this on YouTube, it's a device that connects to the system that lets you know where data is going from and to. Homeland Security would like you to have this. Because it sends up a red flag if it's a suspicious IP address. And unfortunately, there was a misinformation campaign tying this Albert sensor to George Soros. And as ridiculous and crazy as that sound, it was the effect. It was very effective. That one county removed it, Ferry County. There's a story on NPR, All Things Considered, that talks about that thing very happening. But we were successful in 2 or 3 other counties that reached out to us so that we can give them talking points, fact sheets, and information. And we gathered a meeting at the county auditors, CISA, Homeland Security, to let them know that, look, this Albert sensor is not a George Soros machine. It is simply a device that protects your system network. Please do not remove it. And I think I told you, sadly, 6 to 8 weeks later, we were notified by U.S. Cyber Command that there were 6 Russian or identified Russian IP addresses that state and local governments were sending data to. Luckily, nothing from my office. But the threat is real, both externally and internally. That's why we need somebody who has the experience to be able to combat these threats.
And that said, what needs to be improved within Washington's election system?
Well, the main thing is always getting ahead of your, I don't want to say enemies, but those overseas or those malign actors and those folks internally. So there's a couple of ways we deal with that. Number one was we inform the public of what's going on with your ballot, right? So that there's no misconception of it. A lot of people don't know what goes on. 35% of Washingtonians in the King 5 poll noted that they didn't trust the 2020 elections, and that's why we have to tell people what happens when they turn their ballot in, when they sign their ballot. The other thing is getting at misinformation that comes up. Whenever misinformation comes up, we got to deal with it right away. That's why I've created a team of individuals to do that and do the voter outreach and education that I've been talking about. We've doubled the cyber team that we had from 4 to 8, and the one thing we're going to do next time and more of is grants and assistance to our counties. There's a lot of counties out there that are very tiny and small. They only have like maybe 3 or 4 staff, and maybe they're sharing it with another county elected official like the treasurer. One county actually does that. And so what we have to do is help those counties out, because this is one team. We all have to defend ourselves from the threats outside.
Okay, thank you, Craig. Sure, just to change the subject a little bit, the editorial board was trying to figure out about ranked choice voting earlier today. We have a county charter amendment asking about ranked choice voting, and I thought I might ask the expert what he thinks about ranked choice voting. That's hard to say. Anyway, what's your take on it?
Sure, absolutely. So this is probably where the differences will occur between myself and my opponent, but she can talk for that. But I'll tell you my personal opinion on this. Number one, I just want to say, look, the role of Secretary of State is to always assist the counties in their elections. So if Clark County decides to do ranked choice voting, or Seattle decides to do ranked choice voting, obviously we have to be there to support them, and we will do that professionally and at high standards. But my opinion is of ranked choice voting is I don't think now is a good time to do it. It is hard enough to get people to vote now under the current system where it's very easy, where you just vote for your favorite person in that particular race. Imagine, if you will, you have a close race and you're doing recounts, and now you're basing everything on algorithm, because that's what ranked choice voting does. It is based upon an algorithm. And I know that the algorithm is sound, and I know the algorithm cannot be hacked. But with the amount of misinformation that's going on right now, we don't need to have this level of complexity to add to the misinformation that's out there. Now is not the time to do this. Additionally, I think about those citizens that or citizens where English is not their first language. There's a lot of counties where they don't have the resources, or the population has not reached the threshold to send out voter guides in their language. And so now you're asking folks, let's say my mom, who English is not their first language, and let's say she just, we go back in time and they decide to make ranked choice voting an option. She is going to have a hard time figuring that out, because that is completely alien to her. And so we really need to think about those underserved communities. Let's not disenfranchise people from this. The other thing that and the advocates are not thinking about is what about the voters that have developmental disabilities? My son is 21 years old. He is a U.S. citizen. He has every right to vote, but he has cognitive disabilities. Okay, so he's going to end up living in my house or living in an adult family home for the rest of his life. And it's very easy and simple for him to vote right now, because all I do is here's the ballot, Truman, and here's the voter guide statement. And, he's going to have a hard time reading it. And maybe he chooses off the pictures, but guess what? That's his right to do it as a U.S. citizen. And he just picks his favorite one out of that group. Now I got to explain to him ranked choice. That is very difficult for somebody like Truman. And there's many Trumans out there. I also wonder, to the advocates, what problem are we trying to solve here? Because I'll give you an example. The legislature is the most diverse it has ever been. So if you're trying to get diversity out there, guess what? We've done it under the current system. If you're trying to get it so that there are changes, in power, it's happened before, because I was in the majority when I started, and I was in the minority, and then back to the majority. So I don't know what problem they're trying to solve, and there's a lot of problems that can happen when doing this. I'm sorry I spoke too long. It's just that this particular time, there are a lot of issues that I hope that the advocates can solve before we move forward on this. And I understand that is a local option, but guess what? If you do it in Clark County or it happens in Seattle, I guarantee you there will be people who will be left behind and disenfranchised by this. And you don't want to do that in elections.
Colleen?
You just helped us write that editorial.
Exactly.
You can just type that up and send it in by Tuesday. We'll be good.
Yeah, I was wondering, could you expand a little bit more, Mr. Hobbs, on your efforts and the efforts of your office to where historically underserved communities are concerned? Maybe a few more specifics about issues that you're seeing and what you are trying to do to address those.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, the office hasn't really. There's nothing against Kim. Kim Wyman is an awesome Secretary of State. I want you to know that. So is Sam Reed and Ralph Monroe. The issue is they've been working very hard to protect our elections from cyber threats and misinformation. And as you know, this is a recent phenomenon, and so they've been struggling with that. But what I'm trying to do is revamp the office in such a way as to do more voter outreach, working with our 39 county auditors. So what I have done is, when I resubmitted the budget, because when I got in there in November, the governor allowed me to pull back the budget that was submitted by Kim Wyman and resubmit it under, what my priorities are. And being a son of an Asian immigrant, I wanted to make sure we do a lot of outreach. So what I plan to do is create a department, if you will, dedicated to this. So the idea is to hire people that know the language and the culture of this community that we're trying to service. So they do this in King County. So I want you to know that I didn't just pull this out, out of thin air. I'm copying from another county where it's successful, and they will go out to those communities to meet with them. It's the Trusted Messenger program, basically, was what they call it. And because I can't hire enough people to do that, we're going to contract with certain groups that will help us reach out to those communities. So, for example, I talked to the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm going to be talking to them again. That's in the Tri-Cities. There's a great opportunity to work with that group so they can get the word out to their community. Is like, hey, if you are a U.S. citizen, let's help you register to vote. Oh, by the way, let's teach you, how the voting process is done. Don't forget to sign your ballot, because, by the way, Hispanics are 4 times as much. Their ballots are rejected because of, or 3 times as much because they failed to sign the ballot. And those are the issues that we can work on and help people with. And so that's what we're doing right now. We are hiring. I won't have the people ready for this election because it's only a month away, but we'll be ready for next year.
So when you say you're creating a department for that, is the department created already and you're hiring? Have you gotten the funding for that?
We got the funding for it. We just need to hire the people.
Okay.
We're several, we're short people right now. It's hard to hire people. And it's not just me, it's everybody.
Colleen, did you have a follow-up on that?
No, thanks.
Okay. Talk about vote by mail. Should that raise concerns about election security?
Absolutely not. It shouldn't at all. We just got to talk more about it and how it is secure, because a lot of people don't realize that every signature is checked, and that is done at the county level. Additionally, if somebody votes for somebody, we're going to find out about it, because if the signatures don't match, your ballot's going to be rejected. And that happens quite a bit. A lot of times it's not intentional. For example, sometimes you have kind of a matriarch of a house or a patriarch of the house, and they sign for, everybody in there. It does happen. And then those are caught. They'll bring up, I've seen it happen where you watch the process. Again, I invite everyone to go to your county auditor and check out the process. But sometimes they'll bring up the ballots of one household, and they'll look at all the signatures. And sometimes, go, hey, wait a minute, all these signatures match. And then they'll be rejected. And of course, those folks are notified that they're going to have to re-sign or attest to the fact they did vote. But again, a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that, we're notified if somebody passes away. So if you voted and you passed away, guess what? We're going to know about it. Again, we have caught people that have voted for people that passed away. Again, not intentional. A lot of times it's kind of a sad story where a spouse votes for their loved one that passed away because they told them how they were going to vote. So they voted for them and signed it. You can't do that. And those people are talked to. But that does happen. But again, a lot of people don't know that. A lot of people think that you can just get away with voting multiple times and that dead people vote all the time. That's simply not true.
And in 2020, how many cases of fraudulent voting were there in Washington? How many have been found?
Greg, I have to get back to you, but I know it was very, very few, probably just a handful of folks.
Okay. Is that because election officials aren't looking for it, or because it doesn't exist as widespread as?
Oh no, we look for it, but it's just that it doesn't happen a lot. And you've heard the myth about how undocumented or non-citizens vote, right? I mean, we've all heard that one, but that doesn't happen. And one of the reasons it doesn't happen is because first of all, when you go get a driver's license, you have to attest that you're a U.S. citizen. You have to sign, and then on your ballot, there it's very clearly marked that you're attesting that you are, or you're signing that you are a U.S. citizen. And the other thing that people fail to understand, and my mom knew this very well, is that they don't want to put their citizenship at risk. If they're trying to be a citizen, the last thing they want to do is vote, because that puts them in jeopardy. I mean, you could, that's a fine, that's jail time, that's a crime. So that's why it doesn't happen.
So would you say that vote by mail is secure? So you believe Washington should stick with it, and you would defend that?
Oh, absolutely. I would absolutely do that, and continue on with the vote, with the information, or informing the voters of our process. Another thing that I haven't talked about here is the ERIC system, the Elections Registration Information Center, where multiple states are a part of it. And what the ERIC does is it communicates with other databases, so that, let's say, Craig, you move to another state, you forget to cancel your registration here. Guess what? We're going to find out if Craig registered in another state, right? So we're going to be notified by that. But again, a lot of people don't know that, and we have to do a better job of letting people know.
Now, if maybe Washington has secure voter registration and voting systems, what if another state has a less secure system? Does ERIC make us vulnerable to attacks from a different state?
The good thing about our state is we talk to multiple databases along with being part of ERIC, and they talk to multiple databases. So there's very small and minor risk, but a majority of the states are on ERIC, so that is a good thing.
Looking ahead to next year, what kind of will you have any legislative requests, either budgeting or for laws?
Sure. Budgetary requests is what I'm going to ask for. For example, I would like to provide more funding and grants to counties so they can help in their election process. As I mentioned before, some of these counties are very tiny and are not capable, if there's a crisis, to be able to defend themselves from misinformation. Or some counties don't have enough resources to put all the ballot drop boxes out. There's a requirement to have X amount of drop boxes out in certain areas, and some counties just can't do it. I know for a fact there are counties right now that cannot do it because they don't have the people or the resources, and so I would like to help them do that. I would like to do a misinformation, cyber, and physical security exercise in 2023, and so that is that's above a regular tabletop exercise, where you actually have a closed system where you're creating scenarios in which dealing with misinformation, and you're having folks who are trying to penetrate system networks, and then you have another kind of like a white cell that monitors this and does this evaluation, so that in the end, when it's all done, we can all sit down and figure out what we did right and what we did wrong and how we can fix those vulnerabilities. So it's something I would like to do in 23. Another thing I would like to do is I'm proud to announce that the Secretary of State's office, we do the libraries and our state institutions and state hospitals. We haven't been in the juvenile centers, and we are doing that this time. Very excited about that. I would like to go in all the juvenile detention facilities so that we can service those young people, not with just books, but a chance at rehabilitation, because that's one thing I want to do with our libraries, is not just be a place where you can go, get a good book, but also a place where you can learn skills, so that when you are released from incarceration, that you have some skills. Now, I understand that we can only get a few people at a time, but you know what? It's worth it. It's worth it. It's a resource that's there. We might as well use it. So I'm very excited about doing that. The other thing I'm going to request, because we're going to do a pilot project, I think I talked to you all about it a couple of months ago, is satellite offices for my corporations and nonprofits. currently, right now, if you have an issue and you can't navigate the internet, because that does happen. We just recently had a situation where a senior citizen, a Marine, combat veteran, hard of hearing, just had a hard time navigating the web and just needed a face-to-face conversation. So that's a prime example. And a lot of our churches are ran by volunteers. So I think it's a good idea to have these satellite offices. So let's say, for example, you have one in Vancouver. That way, that person who's having problems don't have to drive all the way to Olympia to try to get their issue resolved. And what I'd like to do is, for those folks in the satellite offices, that they have set office hours, but they also have hours where they're actually traveling in the particular area. Because obviously I can't do enough offices. It's just not possible. That costs money.
Craig or Colleen, anything else?
I have a question. Your opponent is running as a nonpartisan, and in Clark County, at least, we've recently made the office, several of our county offices, nonpartisan. What do you think about making Secretary of State and other offices like Insurance Commissioner into nonpartisan positions?
Absolutely. So look, and I've mentioned several times in candidates forum debates and editorial boards, is I don't mind if that happens one way or the other. What I am telling everybody is that you need to find out what the person is like, right? There was a battalion motto in my old infantry battalion, which was deeds, not words, right? So you look at the person's deeds, see if that person really is, a quote unquote nonpartisan, or if they're a partisan, or which way they're leaning, because when they get in there, it might be too late. So I mean, I have a history of working across the aisle. I still kept my committee chairmanship in financial institutions when the Republicans took charge of the Senate. Many of you know of my good working relationship with Senator Curtis King, who's endorsed me. I've had many Republicans endorse me. And of course, I've mentioned I have the Association of Washington Business and the Labor Council have endorsed me. You've got to work in the legislature to get bills passed. And you're not going to be able to do that unless you have those relationships, and I have consistently had those. So I hope people just don't simply go, well, I'm just not going to vote for Steve just because he's got a D next to his name. I hope they look at the person, and I do have a history. Look, I'm a Democrat, but I can still work across the aisle. I might be pro-choice and pro-labor, but I also work with business, and I work with the Republicans.
Do you think voters look too much at the labels, though, the D or the R, and kind of like they're choosing a Chevy or a Ford?
They probably do at times. At least a small percentage on the political spectrum will definitely do that. It's been like that for 200 years now. But just to point this out, I mean, the last 3 secretaries of state were Republicans. They were partisan, and people trusted them. I think, again, I point to the fact of what, look at the person. What are they doing? Are they being unfair? Are they working across the aisle? Those are the questions you have to ask yourself and do the research on.
Okay, that makes sense. I asked the reporters, I said we were meeting with you today. I said, do you have any questions for him? And somebody that covers county government said that our auditor, Greg Kimsey, is interested in having a law that would allow the county to use citizenship information provided on jury questionnaires. Have you heard anything about that? Do you have any opinion on that?
I have heard nothing about that. It's probably because what ends up happening is because there's a county auditors association. So at this level, they're all figuring out what ideas they like, and it's being filtered through. And we always work with them. We work with their legislative caucus, I guess. And then, obviously you can't pick them all. So it's like 3 or 4. And then we help sponsor those and shepherd those through the legislature.
So that one hasn't quite surfaced to your level yet then?
No. Usually what I like to do is make sure that all the county auditors like it.
Well, that seems like a reasonable idea.
Great. Any other questions?
This is not a policy question. I'm just curious. Do you have a prediction on voter turnout for this year's general election?
I've heard that it might be in the 60s percentile. I mean, it is an off-year election. I wish it was higher. Every Secretary of State and county auditor wants to be higher, but that's probably what it's going to be.
Even though this seems like an especially fraught, if you will, almost election for an off-year election, you still think it's still going to be a depressed voter turnout?
No, Colleen, in your neck of the woods, it's going to be very exciting. I think you'll have a higher voter turnout. You had a situation in Congress that I didn't expect to happen, and it did. And so it's very interesting where you're at. But yeah, certain areas will be a little higher than others because of the interest and because the activities of both parties out there doing a get out the vote effort. Because no doubt, I'm sure that both the Democrats and Republicans out there in Clark County are doing everything they can to get their people out. Which, that's hopefully we can help on our end, just increasing voter turnout without having to do that. But that's why one of the things I like to do is engage with the young people. I think I mentioned to you all a couple months ago how we're going to try to team up with the local gaming industry to create maybe a mobile game app for young people so that maybe they vote on a fantasy setting where they're voting for imaginary characters, and we throw in some civics questions and they get points and they become, they level up. We're looking at different, this is theoretical at this particular point, but I would like to try something like that because I think it'd be very exciting.
And talking about voter turnout, how do you define that you have been successful at your job? Is it turnout? Is it what would be the number one thing that makes you think I've done this job well?
The number one thing doing the job well is like at the very end after certification where you don't have a situation where it's going to court or you have massive doubt or that's how I basically measure success. Is the election is over and the losers have lost and the winners have won and they're assuming their positions and taking the oath, and we don't have a situation like a January 6th both in DC and here at home, and we're not going to court.
With that, give us your final pitch for why voters should support you.
Sure. Thank goodness I have something already prepared for this. So anyway, I want to thank you all for putting this on, and I know Julie isn't on here, but I do want to thank her for running for office because it is not easy. Sometimes it can be painful, but I also want to stress the importance of this office. It's not enough to simply manage the office assisting our 39 counties in elections, like I've already done this year. Because of January 6th and the threats to our elections from malign actors here and overseas, we need to have someone who has the experience and background to fight those threats to our democracy. I've done it for real in Kosovo and Iraq because I was there when they were doing their elections. I took part in helping and fostering those elections. And I've been doing it here as your Secretary of State for pretty much almost a year. And lastly, it isn't time to have someone in this office isn't it time to have someone in this office who represents communities who feel underrepresented and underappreciated? As a son of an Asian immigrant and father to a special needs child, we need someone who can speak for them. I'm already talking to your local Hispanic Chamber of Commerce in the Tri-Cities. I'm talking to other groups. I'm proud of my history of bipartisanship, which not only earned me endorsements across the aisle, but trust in those elected officials that will be needed to get bills and budgets passed. There's more to this office than elections, and we are already starting our plans to have satellite offices across the state to help those who want to start a small business or nonprofit. I've talked to you about our libraries, how we'd like to use our libraries as a means of rehabilitation, and also working with our community libraries and rural communities out there to help libraries be a safe place for kids to hang out. And I'm looking forward to earning your vote this election. And hopefully this this election will be over with and I can come down there to Clark County and talk to you all about the new programs that we're starting in this office next year.
Great. Well, Steve, thank you very much and good luck to you.
Thank you
Thanks for
very
your
much.
time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.